Hello, and welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. I'm Ryan Purvis, your host, supported by our producer Heather Bicknell. In this series, you'll hear stories and opinions from experts in the field, stories from the front lines, the problems they face and how they solved them, the areas they focused on from technology, people and processes, to the approaches they took that will help you to get to the grips with the digital workspace inner workings.
There's a podcast I listen to called what's it called? It's with Mike Hurley and another guy. What's his name? I'll find it now. Cortex. Gray. I don't know what his first name is, but they just basically, they don't have an intro, they don't have an outro, they just start talking. Or they bring you in and they just start talking, and then it just ends at the end of a sentence. And I think they talk for 3 hours and they cut it down to an hour.
That sounds like very painful to me.
Well, but look, that's his business, Mike Hurley's business. If you listen, because I think Rocket's part of the same brand. It's all Relay FM.
Relay FM, yeah.
Yeah. So that's his game. So, you know, if he's got the time to do it. So, you know, if not, why not? Which is quite ironic, because the episode I wanted to talk to is also a Relay FM, came from a Relay FM podcast, which was the Automators episode. Just trying to think what it was called now. It was their 50 favorites or their favorite automations. Let me find the episode. You say you had a chance to listen to it?
Yeah, I did. And I'm very curious to know kind of what sparked your interest in it. And yeah, it was called Some Favorite Automations, and it was their 50th episode. Very curious to know, do you do any sort of personal automation, or kind of what interested you about the episode?
So I sort of live vicariously through them. And all the automations that they do, because it always sounds like they're automating these awesome things and it's so simple to do. And then if I sit in front of something like shortcuts to do it, I find it just a little bit painful to do, or it's not something you do in 5 minutes. You need to spend an hour doing it. And I don't always have an hour to play. What sort of piqued my interest at the time was two thoughts. One thought was that you got Rosemary and I forget the other guy's name. Rosemary is a developer and the other guy is not. So that was the one point they made. And David, that was it. And the point was that for Rosemary, she does very complicated workflows. So she'll use APIs and such to do things. Whereas David will kind of cobble things together in a non-developer way. So and it comes across that he finds it a lot easier to cobble things together using the flow, and she, on the other hand, feels like she needs to do more scripting or something like that. And I might be bastardizing it. But what I was thinking about at the time, which was that we're reaching a point that in the enterprise, or it's going to come to the enterprise fairly soon, that the end users are going to want to be able to automate things. And they do to an extent anyway. I mean, the amount of macros that are built into Excel, the amount of homegrown applications that are built in the business by the business. They hire a guy who can write a bit of code and he builds something, and all of a sudden that becomes an application that has to be supported. Those have been happening for years. But what's happening more and more is you're getting services like it used to be called Flow in the Microsoft world, and they've just changed its name to Power Apps, I think, which are just if then else rules. And there's automation platforms like Zapier and if this then that, which if you know a little bit and you can and the APIs exist and these are just really connectors with rules. You can do some funky stuff. So, for example, I have an automated tweet every day, which is whenever the International Space Station comes over my location, it sends out a tweet. Anytime that NASA says something, it sends out a tweet. Every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, I get a weather notification, and I get an extra one if there's going to be rain that day, which in the UK is quite often. So these are those are the sort of automations that I've done. But some of the stuff that they talk about, which I would like to try, and it's definitely around the technology now improving, is having like NFC pads or stickers that you have at certain locations. Like, for example, in the episode, she talks about getting in a car and scanning NFC or tapping the pad, and it picks a random playlist and gives you some locations based on the calendar for directions to drive, which are really cool ideas. I hadn't even thought about that sort of simplicity. So those were the things that the first thing that sort of got my mind. The second thing is you've got the ecosystem that is Apple with shortcuts, and you've got really nothing in the Microsoft space. But the Microsoft desktop is the most prevalent. So it's almost like there's an opportunity there for someone to come up with an extension to Power Apps, and maybe Microsoft's going to come up with it, that gives the end user on their desktop the ability to do some automations, like cleaning their own desktops, because we've always built it from IT outwards. But maybe it's for the end user to build their own or pick their own rules they want to run themselves. So sort of self-empower them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Android has anything like that either. Yeah,
I've never actually heard about it. The Android. Look, I don't listen to a lot of Android stuff. I mean, I'll be honest, listening to Rosemary and David, it wants me to go get a Mac, because all the stuff they do is on a Mac. And it almost makes me feel like the Windows platform is inadequate. I'm sure there is stuff out there, but it's not as prevalent. And as I say, Android, I've never heard anybody mention an equivalent. It'd be interesting to see if there is actually anything.
Yeah, I think what appealed to me about the Mac, and this might be a Mac thing, it might not, but the kind of codeless approach where David has hacked things together is very appealing to me, because, I'm not a developer. I'm not someone who will be able to pour a ton of time into that side of things. It would be a whole new skill set to learn on top of trying to do the automation. So the more what I associate, Apple and Mac with a more user-friendly approach for non-techies.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we were talking about this thing recently where our in-laws or our parents get told to get Apple devices because it means there's a low IT support requirement. Whereas the minute they go down the route of an Android, there's questions and can I get help? And it's the same with Windows. Windows does some very strange things, which the Mac tends to either work or not work. If it doesn't work, then it's a problem and you need to go and sort it out with a techie. But the amount of times it breaks, it's usually a significant break as opposed to a minor break. I don't know if that's your experience as well or not.
Yeah, I've had really good experience with Apple products and really bad experiences with everything else. Well, it's funny, I think, and I'm not a heavy home user anyway, so, I could get away with a Chromebook, I'm sure. And I just have a MacBook Air, but I think it's a 2011 and I haven't had a single issue with it. And I'm not necessarily even great with, applying updates and things. I'll do it eventually, but I know what good practice is, and I don't necessarily actually do it on my home computer. Whereas my boyfriend has now gone through, several Windows laptops that weren't, the cheapest ones either. And my work laptop, I won't name the brand, but I've constantly have problems, and I know it was more expensive and is more high powered than my Air. Of course, I'm using it for more things, but the amount of, I've never had a blue screen on my Mac.
Yeah, I mean,
blue, but
well, that's the thing. So my wife's Mac, she's got it's an Air, but it's a small one. I mean, we've had that thing for about 6 years now, and barring having to change the battery, and when we change the battery, we have to change the Wi-Fi chip as well. We haven't had any problems with it, barring running out of battery. Forget to plug it in, but it just works. And yes, it can be a little bit slow now because as it's also getting old. I think hers is a 2010 or it's probably a 2012. So it is a bit slow, but it's enough for sending email and writing documents and all that sort of stuff. And we want to get her a new machine, and she's adamant she doesn't want a Windows device, and I don't blame her. Windows 10 is a far far worse platform than Windows 7 was, and Windows 7 wasn't that great. So, yeah, I think my next one will be Mac because of that usability factor.
Yeah, I mean, just anecdotally, I don't tend to have any issues with it, which is just, it's funny, but.
Well, and I think that's where the automation thing comes into, because your base is stable, you can tend to focus on the optimization step. Whereas, I've had to rebuild my Windows device twice this year because of various issues with updates rolling out from Microsoft. And, you're always looking at it the next morning going, oof, this thing restarted by itself. I didn't ask it to restart. Is it going to work? And to sit and reinstall all your stuff after it's bombed out, it takes up so much time. You don't want to actually mess with it. Whereas your Mac tends to be so stable, you can spend that time going, oh well, I'll make these shortcuts that do my, look after my task list or my timesheets or whatever else that I need to do. That's really mundane and could be automated.
Yeah. So what apps have you used in the past for building those automations you were mentioning, like the Twitter ones?
So that's if this then that. So when they first came out, that must be 4 years ago now, 5 years ago. The biggest challenge I had with them at that stage was there weren't that many integrations. Or they're very Americanized. So it's things that we just didn't have here in the UK. So they've gotten better at that now. So for example, I have it integrated with my Fitbit. So every night I get a snapshot of my activities, and that goes into my journal so that I don't have to go and do it anymore. Because I like to know when I look back, last year this time, how many steps did I take? How many fitness things did I do? How well did I sleep? All that kind of stuff. So I use it for that sort of thing. But on my desktop, I actually don't have anything anymore. And this comes back to the stability concerns that I have with Windows 10. But I'm thinking more and more like there's a lot of tasks that I do repeatedly going, oh, I should automate this. And I'm now looking at my iPad going, I keep hearing you can do these things. Maybe I should give it a go. Things like printing a document to PDF so you can make notes on it. Or a lot of these guys talk about running timers to measure their time, where they're spending their time is not necessarily time tracking for billing, but am I doing enough work time versus free time versus maybe fitness or whatever it is. So I'm looking at shortcuts at the moment to do some of that sort of stuff.
Maybe, we're just rounding out our email challenge. Maybe we should start some sort of like automation challenge, try to build some sort of automation into our workflows in the next month or something like that. What do you think? Yeah,
that's a good idea. That's a very good idea, actually, because funny enough, that email challenge was one of those things that I wanted to automate. And I looked at it because of the different mailboxes that I had and where they sit. It ended up being probably more, you always got to balance these things out. If you're going to write code or build something, is it more time to do it manually for the period of time than it is to write the code? Then you should just keep it manual. If it's something you do every day for the rest of your life, then you should build some code or automate it. But that would be interesting to do some sort of automation challenge. That's a good idea. I don't know what you'd automate.
Well, the one that piqued my interest from that episode was the podcast one that I don't know if it was friend or editor had built that will remove all of his ums from the recording.
Yes, I did hear that.
That might be a little complex to start off with.
Yeah, I would probably go with something much simpler, like an if this then that automation. But on your Mac, you might be able to do something. I think they use Keyboard Maestro for that.
Yeah, they focused on that a lot on the episode. I do use Zapier, and to be honest, I mean, I'm sure they say the word automation on their site. I'm sure, if pressed on it, I might have made that connection. But since it's so easy to use and has so many business applications for me, and I imagine many others, because, you want these different apps or services or whatever to talk to each other, I didn't necessarily think of me creating a Zap as an automation, which I think comes back to what you're saying about end users adopting this.
Well, I guess we have to define what automation is. I mean, what would you define it as?
That's a good, I mean, I guess that's, that comes back to the point about it can be a very simple thing or it can be a very complex thing. And I think as end users, or maybe just me personally, when I use a tool like that or do something, and I think this came through in the episode as well, where David was kind of saying, well, I'm not as legit as you, Rosemary. I don't do the coding aspect. So there's, we tend to play down the things that we're doing because it doesn't feel like technical enough or like we've done enough to call it like to make a big deal out of it and call it like an automation, like we've done something amazing. But, I think their point was that it is, if it works and it's doing something for you and, it's doing that thing instantly in the background without you touching it, right? That's an automation.
Well, that's it. I was going to say, to me, the definition is anything that I would have done myself that now something else is doing. That's automation, whether it's something simple or complex. And I think complexity is usually just multiple things happening, either in sequence or in parallel. So you're still getting back down to hopefully simple things.
I don't know if you wanted to get too deep into the IT user angle as well in terms of complexity, because that's a problem that I think about from time to time, in that how do we bring automation into IT workflows in ways that make sense and isn't too powerful? Because I think there's some things that are pretty safe to automate, emptying your end users' recycle bins on some sort of schedule is generally a pretty safe automation. Although I have heard of people storing documents or storing photos for some reason in their recycle bins and then coming to IT and being angry when they're not there anymore. So even that, you might have end users who aren't doing things as you might expect, right? So how do you, have you done any automations for anything in the end user computing side?
Yeah, so this is from a tech, IT point of view, we've pushed down automations on the end users. So that does clean up as one. And that was pretty ruthless in the sense that if it was in a space that it shouldn't be, it was gone. And bear in mind, these things are triggered based on alarms, and an alarm is an event with some sort of threshold or criteria. The other ones we've done have been performance related. So counting the number of open windows and then asking the user to close them. And these are specifically on VDIs where, because you're on a virtual desktop, your resources are shared and you need to be conscious of these that there's other users. So we would, warn them if they went over 14 windows that they need to close some. And from a good sort of using your device point of view, you should close applications you're not using anymore. The amount of people that keep them open and wonder why they have poor performance, it's always ironic. There's that. There's resource management. So looking at applications using too much CPU or memory, and then again popping up some sort of warning that they need to either shut it down or restart it. We've also done some work around automatic reboots. Again, this is for users that don't reboot their machines regularly. It's good to reboot them every 2 weeks or so. So we were enforcing them weekly, in some cases bi-weekly in others. So those sort of basic things give a good experience generally. And then you get into the sort of the RPA space, the robot process automation, which instead of building integrations between two products that you would in enterprise, let's say your ERP system and your HR system, you can use an RPA agent to fill in the form or fill out the fields from one system to another as if they were the user, which is a way of moving the integration mess from one place to another. Instead of because now you've got to rely on the robot being able to get the data out of the other system, which they usually can, but then put the information into the new system, and it depends on how they figure out where the fields are, where you could have more problems or less problems. And your problems there usually are if the fields are changed for whatever reason,
a system upgrade and no one knows, and you got to go redo all the robot mappings. And then personally, I think that's, as I say, mess from one place to another instead of actually solving the core problem. But these are all very technical solutions. The end user is not always driving these things, which is where I think this will start changing in the future, that the end user will start wanting to drive them.
Yeah, I mean, I think, with things like Zapier, that it's already, it's there, it's happening. It's certainly, marketing automation is a big thing. So in my space, it's very prevalent because just the need, like you were saying, the need to move data around and not necessarily depend on IT for all of that. And I really enjoy things like Google has different products for, you can put a snippet of code on your website and then you can, and I don't know if this, counts as automation, but you can put a snippet of code on your website and then use Google Tag Manager or Google Optimize, these different products related to Google Analytics to make changes on your site without getting in there and changing the code, which, yeah. And then we have an external web dev agency and, they bill by the hour. They're not cheap. And we use Drupal, which is one of the more infamously difficult CMS, website platforms. So sometimes it's handy, if I just want to if I want to try something, test something out, if I change a CTA button here, if I add one here, will people click on it more? I don't necessarily want to go to the dev team to try a test like that. So Google has this suite of tools that helps me do that.
Oh, I didn't even know those existed.
Yeah, they're handy.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's it sort of naturally needs to happen is you need to be able to have the ability to not always go back to a technical person to do something on a platform. Not necessarily have full configurator rights that you can, rework a workflow or whatever. But if you needed to Facebook used to do it, I don't know if they still do it, where if they test new functionality, you would see they could release it into production almost straight away, and just a certain subset of users would see it for the first time. So every time you log in, you might get different functionality because they're testing out something, and then you log in again and it's gone. But they're doing that as a way to test if something works or doesn't work, or it's liked or not liked. It's almost live testing, as opposed to going through a very rigorous testing and release cycle, which takes too long to get it out to market.
Yeah, just A/B testing the users instead.
Yeah, exactly. And it's straight from an engineer testing something. I think there's some QA involved, but it's on the premise, let's rather get it out there and see if it works or adds value than hide behind bureaucracy and all that sort of stuff. Because that's the other challenge with this sort of, the more you enable the end user with things they can do themselves, how do you maintain stability of the environment? And that's usually the bureaucracy comes in.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's yet another thing for IT to figure out how to adapt to, right? Because the need to automate these workflows, make these small automations just to even get different things to talk to each other to speed up our workflows is definitely there.
Yeah, it is. And we, when I was with one of the banks and we saw the sort of server side was easier to automate because you weren't dealing with the human element. So if I had to reboot a server, I can usually do that because there should be a redundancy, or I can schedule the reboot, or bring the service down in a low impact, sort of time a day or period. Whereas if you're going to mess around with the user's computer while they're busy working, that's going to get you a reaction that you don't want. You don't want it, neither does the user. So you've got to be a lot more careful about how you automate things. So communication becomes your number one priority, and that experience or education of that experience is very important too. We're rebooting this machine because it gives you more resources or better improve your experience, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned with using notifications to let the user know that something would be happening and why You can even use those to say, not right now, let them delay the action or something like that, but give them a heads up, because if you just do something like reboot their computer without their knowledge, that could of course be extremely disruptive if they're working on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we had scenarios like that. I mean, you get guys, we would have, the reason why we automated the reboot cycle was, it used to be on a Saturday, I want to say Saturday evening, which you would expect to have very few users working. But of course, you would find someone who's busy working on a proposal or something like that, and you're rebooting the machine in the middle because there's no checks being done to see who was logged in. Not initially, all these mistakes we make that we have to learn from. And that, of course, creates the perception problem that you don't care about them as the user. So the automation came in to say, well, actually, you can reboot this machine. Well, the machine will reboot every Friday or Saturday, whatever it is, but you can pause it, a certain amount of times. I think it was 3 times. And then after the 3rd time, you can't put it off. It has to happen. And in the VDI world, especially non-persistent, it's not a case of you have to wait for a new machine to come up. You just really log out, log in again, and you're on a new machine. So your impact is getting a cup of coffee while it logs in again. Mm-hmm. Pretty minimal.
Definitely. Well, I think as we round out this episode, do you have any ideas about what automations you might be keen to try as sort of a challenge?
Yeah, I think something to help us with the podcast would be good. And I was thinking about, so when you put the show notes together, we're obviously looking for the links that we talk about, any books or anything like that. But then we obviously we put the show notes on Transistor, which is our hosting platform, and on the website. And some way of making that process easier would be better, because that's a very clunky process and easy to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. Now, how to automate that, I have no idea. that would be my first idea to sort of figure out.
Yeah, there's so many moves there. There has to be some small thing that could be automated out.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if this is the key here is not to make it a code-based solution. It has to be using something like Shortcuts or Zapier or something like that.
Yeah, maybe it's even just a matter of looking in Zapier and seeing if Transistor is there and what you can do.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's touch base on this one in 2 weeks and see where we are. I don't know if you've got any ideas to automate.
Yeah, I was thinking more along the lines of just some, like, trying to automate some sort of I opened Shortcuts for the first time on my phone yesterday after listening to that episode. So we just ordered a rowing machine for home because not getting as much activity right now, not being, not spending as much time outside. I'm usually someone who walks to work, and I really value that commute. So not having that, I feel like, is going to take a negative toll on me over time. So trying to get some more fitness in. Pretty bummed about not being able to swim this summer, because that's my favorite form of exercise. But anyway, if I could automate something into my health workflow, that would be very handy for me, because often it's the last thing I think about, the last thing on my to-do list, then it gets left off. So even if it's just some sort of reminder that I'm setting up, or I don't know, I'll have to do some exploring as well.
Yeah, so I use an app called Due, D-U-E, which I originally started using because of the timers. So just you can set up timers and it counts down, I think, down to 0, which I've actually stopped using. But they've got a reminder functionality, which I like, in the sense that you can put a reminder there and you can set it being a recurrence, or it's not so much task management, but it's things that I know I need to do that I'll put it there, and then it'll keep reminding me until I do them. So if I say I want to do, I do a HIIT workout every day, so then I've got to tick off that I've done it. And if I don't do it, it just reminds me every 15 minutes until I do it. And you can snooze it. I mean, you've got different things, but it's the same sort of thing. If I want to get into a habit of doing something, then I put it in Due with a daily reminder, and then every day it reminds me, okay, I've done it now. And you just got to have the discipline to say that I will I'll do the thing, or if I don't do the thing, then I'll in my journal I'll say I didn't do it today because I'm tired, I'm feeling sick, whatever, or I just didn't have enough hours in the day. And that works out quite well for me because it's quite simple to add something. And if I find after a couple of days it's not working, then I say, actually, no, this idea of me running 5Ks a day, it's just never going to happen. So I gave it 5 days, didn't work. I'll do something else. So it might be worth doing that and trying that out.
Yeah. How does that differ from just setting an alarm on just with the native iOS app?
I haven't tried the native iOS app for a long time. My experience back then was that it didn't repeat the reminder. So it would remind you and then it would just sort of stop. Whereas this will re-remind you until you actually knock it off.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So, you can try it with all reminders. Dew was recommended to me by someone, and I was like, okay, I'll try it out. It was free at the time. I think I ended up buying it for £2 or £1. And it was at the time when I was really struggling to get into habit on a few things, and it just worked. It just worked. It worked in the sense that I started getting into the habits, and I thought, well, it must be this brutal reminding me all the time. And there are days where my watch will buzz and I look down and I got like 17 things that I'm reminding myself about. And that's only because I haven't cleared them out or I've put too much on my plate. And it's a good way for me to measure my overload and to actually go, well, do I really need to remind about this every day? No, this is probably, I only need to know about this next week. So I'll schedule it to remind me next week. So it's just an option.
Yeah, I feel like there's a need here for an Apple Watch app that can do something like this and of course I haven't been wearing mine in quarantine because I don't want, I'm not putting that pressure on myself right now. But if I was, you're already getting those reminders about those 3 goals, but the ability to add different goals and have something like that set up where it reminds you to start a specific workout would be useful, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, so there's a whole lot of those habit tracking apps. I do find personally that those things get a bit frustrating or create anxiety because now you've got to keep the momentum up. So with the reason why I like Dew or something like that is that if I just cancel a task, I don't see record that I canceled it. So I don't feel like I've missed a day or a week sometimes, and I feel the anxiety of breaking the streak.
Yeah.
And there are reasons that there are things you put streaks in for and things you don't. So if I just do fitness every day, that's also not healthy. So having that break, maybe on the weekends I'm not as intense on it. That's okay. And the reminders are just there. And if I delete them, and I don't feel anything about it. Whereas those habit trackers, those goal tracking things can get a little bit, for me at least, cause a little bit of anxiety.
Yeah, definitely. I think about that way, even just with the native rings functionality, it's like if I, want to take a day off, or if I, am at 28 minutes of exercise instead of 30, it's like, can't we just, I don't want to miss an achievement, just because I missed that 2 minutes.
Yeah, but that's gamification at its best. You should feel like that.
Mm.
Don't you sit and do jumping jacks in the corner until midnight? Like I do.
See, I got my father an Apple Watch when he retired, and that's what he'll do. Sometimes it would be like he would just disappear for a little bit, and it's like 11:30, and it's like, where is he? Where'd he go? But he's just like running around the block because he got that final notification from his Apple Watch, that one that's like, you can still do it, like close your exercise ring. So, it is motivating.
So there is a trick. I finally figured out a way to, because I made myself a deal when I got this last Apple Watch, that I will not have a day where I don't close all 3 rings. And it's easy. I don't think it's, and I don't want you to feel bad, but I don't think it's that difficult to close 3 rings, because standing up for 10 minutes every hour is not difficult to do. To do 30 minutes exercise and I do have an issue with the Apple Watch because sometimes I don't think it counts your exercise as exercise. You should be able to find 30 minutes every day. And then your movement one, the red ring, also, naturally, if you do exercise, that other one just closes off. And you'll find this with your rower, it'll be very easy to get 30 minutes in. But what I do is things like if I'm doing the housework, which is normally my Saturday, that's normally 2 hours of like just sweeping, vacuuming, whatever. I measure that as an open goal. And that's how, if there's days where I'm not going to do any fitness per se, that gets me that closes the ring really easily because I'm still doing activities, just not, going for a run or whatever it is. But your other option is if you're ever close, that 2 minutes thing, give yourself an open goal measurement. Just measure for 2 minutes, that'll close your rings.
Yeah, I think that's part of it is I don't necessarily start the exercise, the activity. So it might not count everything. For me, and this is a total tangent that we could go down a huge rabbit hole on, but it's been the stand goal that's been the hardest for me because one, I don't find it super accurate. If I'm cooking and I have my arms crooked, like I'm chopping things, I'm standing up, but it doesn't, I could miss an hour, which is always so frustrating because you only need to get to that 12. But if you miss one, and I don't want to wear my watch all day. That's been a problem too. That's why I don't hit that stand goal. It's because I don't necessarily want to even wear it for 12 hours a day. So it'd be nice. That's the one that drives me crazy because it's just the hardest to close. But I think oddly enough, working remotely, I think I would hit that a lot easier because sitting at work at my desk, every time I stand up, I'm more conscious that I think leaving my workstation, or it's like I need a bigger excuse, because I'm going farther away than I have to at home to grab something. So yeah, just observations.
Okay. So I think that's going to be your challenge is to wear your watch for a month and change your behaviors.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be a simple thing to do. So that's
yeah. I mean, it's so and this is not a dictatorship by any means, but the reason why I haven't moved away from the Apple Watch, and in fact, I got to a point where I was going to leave Apple. I got so sick and tired of I was really pissed off with iOS 11, I think it was. iOS 12, it was so buggy. Mm-hmm. And the way they had it just really got to me. But the watch was just that thing that kept me close because of the fitness stuff, the activity, keeping yourself going, and it does set the rest. One of the problems that I have, which is I think sounds very similar to you, is that I will work these long bursts without taking breaks, and then get up and my back sore, my neck sore, my whatever, and having that little reminder to get up every hour. If it's go for a walk or do some push-ups or whatever it is, go downstairs, get some coffee. It helps. Definitely helps.
Yeah, it does. And I would definitely use those reminders as well. For me, if I'm in a real flow state, I don't even feel my wrist vibrate or whatever. The notification completely passes me by.
Well, which is fine. I mean, you can turn up the haptics, but that's also I use a special clock. What's it called? Let me see if I can find a name for it. It's by Yin Biot. It's a 60-minute clock, and you basically turn a knob. And when you turn the knob, it sets the timer. So I've set it for 30 minutes now, for example, and it'll count down back to zero, and at zero to go off. So you'll hear it. There we go. So I use that, or I use my watch. If I'm working at sort of early in the morning and everyone's sleeping, I'll use my watch. But that keeps me, don't burn out, because you can do a lot more 20-minute, 25-minute sessions with a break than you can do 2-3 hour marathons. And that's the whole Pomodoro technique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, cool. I'm excited to try out some of these habit changes and automations.
Cool. Sounds good. Alrighty. Well, thanks for catching up with me today, Heather.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Heather Bicknell is our producer and editor. Thank you, Heather, for your hard work on this episode. Please subscribe to the series and rate us on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Follow us on Twitter @the DWW Podcast. The show notes and transcripts will be available on the website www.digitalworkspace.works. Please also visit our website www.digitalworkspace.works and subscribe to our newsletter. And lastly, if you found this episode useful, please share with your friends or colleagues.